Hey guys, my first 4K monitor was from LG, the 27UD68. I got it around 2 years ago and it retailed for about $600 here in Canada. It was IPS, 4K and had a 60Hz refresh rate, which was quite amazing at the time considering all the 4K 30Hz panels there was. But fast forward to now and things haven't changed much. We rarely see higher refresh rates than 60Hz at 4K and the panel technologies are quite similar, apart from Samsung's quantum dot panel technology, and we now get HDR monitors with support for 10-bit colors, but Windows doesn't handle it well in many cases, and there's only a hand-picked selection of content in that format available. On the other hand, one thing that improved a lot is the price. And that's the case with this 4K monitor from PrimeCables that offers really similar specs to my LG monitor. But at only 330 Canadian dollars, pretty much half the price of what I paid back then. This is really exciting as it makes the 4K experience more affordable than ever, and it's things like these that will push the industry forward to make them more standard. So in today's video, we'll take a look at this monitor. But keep in mind that it's only available in Canada for now, and I'm not sure if there's a plan to make it available elsewhere. So without waiting any further, let's see what it's all about. The monitor comes in a plain brown box with PrimeCables logo on it. In it, the panel is well protected and everything seems well packaged. No parts were damaged and everything seemed to be in place. You get a power adapter, which means it isn't built in the monitor. This has the advantage of being easy to replace, but it's harder to manage if you want to hide your monitor's cables. The stand is also in the box, but you need to assemble it together. The included screws strip quite easily, unfortunately, at least with the included screwdriver tool, but they look like Visa screws, so I'm sure you could replace them if you really wore them out. You get one 6-feet HDMI cable too, so you might want to order a DisplayPort cable if you plan on using that connection. The included cable is HDMI 2.0 compatible, so it will work perfectly fine for a 4K 60Hz video feed. Physically, this monitor looks really nice. The black bending, the bezels, and the back seem to be made out of metal, and most monitors, even high-end ones, are entirely made out of plastic, so that's a nice touch. This is really surprising, especially considering the price. Speaking of those bezels, they're not exactly leveled with the panel, but they are very slim and they look great overall. The bottom bezel is plastic, I think, and PrimeCables logo is embossed there. For some, not having a known monitor brand there or simply nothing at all could be a downside, but it blends in decently, so I don't have a problem with it. The monitor feels really solid and it doesn't crack when you move it around like cheaper plastic cases do. The panel is pretty thin too. There's a bump where the inputs are and at the bottom, but everywhere else it's really thin. Now, the stand is nothing out of the ordinary. It's mostly made out of plastic with a metal inner structure. It only tilts, there's no height or pivot adjustments. On the other hand, it's pretty solid and the monitor barely wobbles. Also, the monitor has a Visa mount, so I'd recommend that you buy a monitor arm anyway to have it at the proper height and angle for you. Nowadays, decent monitor arms are pretty cheap and I think they're a great investment for your viewing comfort. In terms of inputs, you get two HDMI 2.0 and two DisplayPort ports. This is a pretty great port selection as most monitors will only have a single DisplayPort input. Also, both HDMI inputs are 2.0, which means that all the ports will support a 4K resolution at 60Hz. And these are great if you want to use more than one computer with it or for gaming consoles. As a comparison, my BenQ monitor only has a single DisplayPort input and two other HDMI ports. There's also a headphone jack and the power input is located on top as well. At the bottom, you get a joystick. This is the only physical controller for the whole monitor. Pressing down on it will turn on or off the monitor, and then using the arrows you can open up the on-screen display. And I have to say, the controls are not really intuitive. Arrow up will act as enter, while arrow down is back, and then in the menu you will use the left and right arrows to go up or down. Whoa, not that easy. So that would be a place where I think it could be a bit better. Both of my LG and BenQ monitors are a lot easier to use on that part. The menu has most of the standard options. You can easily adjust the image settings like contrast, brightness, and sharpness. Then you've got multiple image presets and you can also change the saturation and the color temperature. Those image presets include FPS and RTS, which are all meant for gaming, either first-person shooter or real-time strategy games. There's a pretty good chance that you'll find a combination of settings that will match your likings. You can also turn on FreeSync as this monitor supports it. That way, with AMD GPUs, you can get variable refresh rates when you dip below 60. They don't specify how low it can go. Usually it's at around 40 Hz for 4K panels, but I didn't have any AMD GPU on hand to test it. Now, what about the panel? As I mentioned earlier, it has a 4K resolution, so 3840 by 2160, and at only 27 inch in size, this gives an amazing pixel density, but you will have to scale your OS at around 150%. This will give you what a 1440p resolution would result in terms of scaling, but much sharper. The brightness is rated at 250 nits, which is nothing too exciting. My LG panel is 350 and my BenQ is 300, but 250 will be plenty good in most well-lit rooms. This panel is IPS, so you will get great viewing angles and color reproduction. On the other hand, you won't get fast response times like TN, nor greater contrast ratios like VA panels. Now, PrimeCables claim that this monitor has a 2 millisecond gray-to-gray response time in the gamer picture profiles. I don't have the tools to measure this, but if it's true, it's really good for an IPS panel. The contrast ratio is also 1000 to 1, which is pretty common for most IPS panels. In comparison, my BenQ with a VA panel has a 3000 to 1 contrast ratio, but it's one of the key features of this monitor. And finally, it's also a 10-bit panel, which means it supports HDR colors. Unfortunately, Windows 10's built-in HDR mode isn't that great and I wasn't able to get a great looking image out of it. It was worse than on my BenQ, as even playing back HDR videos or games didn't look great. The colors were mostly washed out and the contrast was poor. Another downside with this monitor is that there's a bit of vignetting alongside the bezels. I don't know if it's the panel or the bezels that caused this, but it's kind of a bummer. It's nothing too bad, and I'm sure I would get used to it after some time, but it's still a bit disturbing at first. Now, this monitor would be great for high-resolution gaming as well. With many HDMI and DisplayPort ports, you can easily route it to a few PCs and consoles, and the support for FreeSync is a nice touch too, if you have an AMD GPU. The response time is really low too for a 4K IPS panel, which is a plus. On the other hand, the refresh rate is only 60 Hz, and most gamers would prefer to sacrifice some resolution for a higher refresh rate, so that's a point to consider. So, in conclusion, what are the pros and cons of this monitor? I think it brings a lot of value for the money at only $330 Canadian for now. You get a 4K IPS monitor with a decent build quality at a price that I haven't seen before. You also get a better port selection than most monitors nowadays, and you also get a VESA mount. The build quality is also really good considering all the aluminum parts all around, and you get a few gaming-oriented features like FreeSync and a low response time. On the other hand, the built-in stand has limited features, the OSD controls are not really intuitive, and the panel has kind of a shadow all around. It also has a 10-bit panel, which is great on paper, but it's not exactly ready to be used out of the box with Windows, unfortunately. So I think it's a great way to get into 4K monitors on the cheap. The monitor looks great, and it seems to be well made. It would be great for high-resolution gaming, or simply for a sharp image, whatever you're doing. The vignetting won't matter much for multimedia content or gaming anyway. But if you want perfectly accurate colors all around and an even backlight for professional work, or if you want a high refresh rate monitor for gaming, this wouldn't be my first choice. So this pretty much wraps it up. As always, I'll have a link down below if you want to check it out for yourself. So hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure you liked the video if you did, and if you didn't, just let me know why in the comments below. Otherwise, don't forget to subscribe if you still haven't already, as I'll see you in the next video.